the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally. Every August, a town of 7,000 people in the Black Hills of South Dakota becomes the largest motorcycle gathering on Earth. 500,000 riders, the packed Main Street, the Buffalo Chip concerts, and the 86th Sturgis Rally. August 7th through the 16th, 2026, is about to do it all again. But the real history of Sturgis is stranger than almost anyone riding into town knows. So here are 20 facts about the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally, checked against the record, including the ones the brochures leave out. Starting with number 20. Number 20. The world's biggest Harley gathering was founded by Indian. Every August, 500,000 riders, the overwhelming majority of them on Harley-Davidsons, make the pilgrimage to Sturgis. It is, without question, the largest gathering of Harleys on planet Earth. And here's what almost nobody rumbling down Main Street knows. Sturgis wasn't born a Harley rally. It was born an Indian rally, founded by an Indian dealer, dominated by Indian machines, and run by a club that rode Indians out of pure loyalty. The founder, Clarence Pappy Hoel, owned the Indian motorcycle dealership on Junction Avenue. At the time, Indian was the great American name, Harley's blood rival. The club he helped charter in 1936, the Jack Pine Gypsies, who, according to the early club minutes, nearly called themselves the Bearcats and then the Coyotes, before landing on the name that stuck, Road Indians, because you bought your machine from Pappy's shop and you stood by it. Now look at the very first rally, August 14th, 1938. 9 riders on the starting line, racing for a $500 purse in front of about 175 neighbors. 8 of those 9 machines were Indians, 1 lone Harley. And the Harley crowd? They were the rival club over in Rapid City, and the friendly Indian versus Harley feud between those two clubs is literally what started the racing that became the rally. 2 groups of men who liked each other and disagreed about whose engine was better. That argument is the seed of the whole thing. Indian, of course, would eventually die. That's a story for another day, and Harley inherited the congregation. But the fact stands, and it's a beauty. The biggest Harley party on Earth was founded on the other side of the great American motorcycle rivalry. 500,000 Harley riders every August, attending a gathering the competition built. And hold that thought, because this list only gets stranger from here. Number 19. The founder's job was crashing motorcycles into fire. The man who started Sturgis was named Clarence Hoel. Everyone called him Pappy, and he wasn't just the organizer of the first rally. He was the entertainment. Pappy's specialty was riding a motorcycle straight through a wall of burning pine boards. Another favorite, deliberately crashing into an outhouse that had been set on fire. He called these stunts his tricks, fun, and foolishness. A respected local business owner, a grown man with a wife and son, intentionally wrecking his own motorcycle into flaming structures because it made his neighbors laugh and cheer. There was no sponsorship deal behind it, no merchandise, no brand activation. He did it because it was fun, because these were his people, and because in 1938 that was reason enough. And understand who this man was. He'd grown up using a motorcycle to drive cattle and ride fence lines on the family ranch. His family ran an ice business, cutting and selling ice in the days before refrigerators, and Pappy was sharp enough to see that trade melting. So in 1936, he made the bet you already heard about, the Indian franchise. And the story passed down in Sturgis is that he had to borrow the money to do it, and that one of the men who lent it to him turned around and bought a motorcycle from him. That was the economy Sturgis was built on. A handshake, alone between neighbors, and a man willing to ride through fire for free. Hold that thought, because by the end of this countdown, you'll see exactly how far from that the rally traveled. Number 18. The founder's wife cooked for the entire rally. In the early years, when racers came to Sturgis from out of state, there were no hotel blocks, no official campgrounds, no hospitality tents. They camped in Pappy Hoel's backyard, and his wife, Pearl, fed them out of her own kitchen. The detail that comes down through every honest account of those years is beans and weenies. A yard full of professional motorcycle racers, treated like family, eating dinner cooked by the founder's wife on a stove a few feet from where they'd pitched their tents. Pearl didn't stop at dinner. She ran the other half of the event, the Gypsy Tour, a guided ride through the Black Hills and Custer State Park with a picnic lunch at the State Game Lodge. And while the men raced and rode, Pearl drove the chase vehicle, going out along the route to rescue riders whose machines had broken down. One year, the story goes, she gave away the family's leftover tea to a stranded tourist whose Ford had overheated on the Needles Highway. Compare that to the modern rally, where basic tent camping at the famous campgrounds starts at $189 a night, and you have the entire transformation of Sturgis in a single image, the distance between Pearl Hoel's kitchen and a ticketing website. The rally has gotten roughly 4,000 times bigger since Pearl fed racers in her backyard. Whether it ever got better is a question we'll leave for the end of this list. Number 17. The anniversary math is deliberately wrong. Here's a piece of trivia you can use to win a bet with any Sturgis veteran. The rally's official anniversary numbers don't add up, and it's on purpose. The first official Black Hills Motor Classic was 1938. But during World War II, the rally shut down, gasoline was rationed, and you could not, in good conscience or by law, burn fuel racing motorcycles for fun while the country poured every drop into the war effort. For several years in the early 1940s, there was no rally at all. The track sat quiet while the young men who would have been racing went overseas instead. When they restarted it in 1946, the organizers faced a bookkeeping question. Do the missing years count? And the Jackpine Gypsies decided yes. They counted an informal gathering from 1937, and they counted the war years, every single one of them, so the numbering would stay unbroken. It's the reason the 75th anniversary landed in 2015 instead of 2013. The math has been off for over 80 years, and it's off because a club of riders in 1946 could not bring themselves to admit there had been years without Sturgis in them. They would rather fudge a number than break the chain. Even the arithmetic was sentimental. Of all the facts on this list, this might be the smallest, and it might tell you the most about what this event meant to the people who built it. Number 16. The first time Main Street closed, it was for trophies. Today, 6 blocks of Main Street Sturgis are closed every August and packed handlebar to handlebar with parked motorcycles, the most photographed street scene in American motorcycling. But the very first time Sturgis closed Main Street for the rally, in 1949, it wasn't for a party. It wasn't for vendors. It wasn't for parking. It was for an awards ceremony to honor the racers. Sit with the order of operations there, because it's the whole early identity of the event in one decision. The town's grandest gesture, the shutting down of its commercial heart, was made to hand out trophies. The racing was the point. The competition was the center of gravity. Everything else, the food, the beer, the crowd, was decoration around the results sheet. A few years later, they started closing the street for motorcycle parking. One single block at first, then more. The street closures grew decade by decade, from 1 block to 6, and somewhere along the way, the reason for them inverted completely. Today, the racing still happens, out at the tracks the Jackpine Gypsies still own. But it's a footnote, a sideshow. Most of the 500,000 people who pack that closed street every August couldn't tell you who won a single race, or that races are even being run. Number 15. The town voted to kill it, and the rally survived by 1%. By 1980, a record 40,000 people were descending on a town of a few thousand residents every August. And a lot of the new crowd hadn't come for racing. The outlaw era had found Sturgis. Public drunkenness, gunfire, fights between rival motorcycle gangs, a police presence just to keep the lid on. The residents had watched their town get taken from them 1 week a year, and they'd had enough. So, in 1981, the citizens of Sturgis held a referendum on whether to end the rally. An actual, formal, citywide vote on killing the thing Pappy Hoel built. The rally survived by roughly 1%. 1%. A few dozen votes the other way, and the largest motorcycle gathering on Earth ends in 1981. And the word Sturgis means nothing today. And savor the dark poetry of the margin. 1%, the same fraction the outlaw clubs had adopted as their identity, after the motorcycle establishment once claimed 99% of riders were law-abiding and only 1% were trouble. The 1%ers nearly cost Sturgis its life. 1% of the voters saved it. The town wasn't done. The next year came another referendum to strip away city services from the rally, and the city attorney had to point out the beautiful, stubborn truth. It wouldn't matter. The rally couldn't be voted out of existence because it ran on private land. The Jackpine Gypsies owned their own tracks and still do. As long as the riders wanted Sturgis to exist, no ballot could stop it. The rally that couldn't be killed by its own hometown. Remember that when we get to fact number 4. Number 14. One vendor in 1904 became an entire economy. Every empire has a patient zero, and for the commercial transformation of Sturgis, historians can point to the exact year. 1974, the first time the rally allowed a temporary vendor to set up at the Sturgis Auditorium. One vendor, one modest little stand. Today, there are hundreds, selling everything from $26 cheeseburgers and rally t-shirts to $100,000 custom motorcycles. Main Street in August is a commercial corridor. Vendor licensing is a system with fees, insurance requirements, and exclusivity agreements that decide who gets the high-traffic corners. The grassroots builder who once showed up with a trailer of parts and a card table has been progressively priced out of the best real estate by established commercial operations that can meet the paperwork. But it all traces back to that single tent in 1974, because the moment one person was allowed to sell to the crowd, the logic of the event began, slowly and irreversibly, to change. The crowd stopped being only a gathering of participants. It became also a market, an audience of wallets, something to be sold to. Number 13. The Buffalo Chip. The campground that became a city and tried to become a real one. In 1981, the same year the town tried to vote the rally dead, a man named Rod Woodruff bought land east of Sturgis and opened a campground called the Buffalo Chip. In the early years, the Chip was a field with a bar and a stage. In 1985, you could camp there for about $20 a night and bring your own beer, watching local bands under the Black Hills sky. Today, the Buffalo Chip is the largest private campground in the United States during its operating season. Not really a campground at all, but a temporary city with its own stores, its own bars, luxury cabins, an RV park, and an amphitheater running 9 straight nights of national headline concerts. The acts that have played the chip read like a classic rock festival: Aerosmith, Def Leppard, Ozzy Osbourne, Willie Nelson, Stevie Nicks. On one August night, Bob Dylan and Kid Rock played back-to-back in a field east of a town of 7,000 people. And that $20 campsite? Basic tent camping at the modern chip starts at $189 a night, scaling up through packages that run several hundred. The Buffalo chip grew so large, so economically complete, that it eventually tried to incorporate as an actual town, its own municipality, a campground with civic ambitions. Number 12. In 1990, more than half the Harleys in America were allegedly in one place. 1990 was the 50th anniversary of Sturgis, and it was the year the dam broke, the year the rally stopped being an event and became a phenomenon. The crowd that came to the Black Hills that August, by the most cited figure, around 400,000 people. In a single stroke, it became the largest tourist event in the history of South Dakota. The town was outnumbered by its visitors at a ratio one historian put at 57-1. For every resident of Sturgis, 57 strangers. And the claim from that year that got repeated everywhere, impossible to fully verify, irresistible to repeat, was that more than half of all the Harley-Davidsons in the United States were at Sturgis that week. One attendee did the arithmetic and calculated that if you lined up every motorcycle at the rally single file, the parade would stretch over 1,000 miles. Roughly the distance from Kansas City to the Lincoln Memorial. Whether every one of those numbers is exact, the meaning is exact. Something fundamental changed in 1990. 400,000 people is not a community. It's an economy. You cannot feed 400,000 people beans and weenies from your kitchen. You cannot learn their names. 400,000 people need hotels, campgrounds, vendors, security, entertainment, and every one of those needs attracts someone whose relationship with motorcycles begins and ends at the cash register. And the timing of the explosion? That's fact number 10. First, the fact that explains who all those new people were. Number 11. Harley invented a club, and the club changed who showed up. In 1983, Harley-Davidson, fresh off the management buyout that saved the company, founded something called the Harley Owners Group, HOG. It started with 33 members. By 1990, it had 200,000. By 2000, 1 million. The HOG was one of the most brilliant marketing inventions in American history, a factory-sponsored social club that gave every new Harley buyer an instant community, organized rides, and a reason to use the machine. And it worked so well that it fundamentally changed who came to Sturgis, because the HOG era coincided with Harley's great repositioning. A Harley-Davidson in 1972 cost around $1,995 and was bought by men who worked in factories, mills, and mines. A Harley in 1995 cost $12,000 to $16,000 and was increasingly bought by men who worked in law offices, medical practices, and financial services. The motorcycle press coined a term for the new arrival: the rich urban biker, the rub. The rub was not a worse person than the old rider, but he was a different one. He had more money. He was less likely to have ever rebuilt his own carburetor. He was more likely, and this detail matters enormously in a few facts, to have trailered his bike to the rally instead of riding it there. He came for the experience of Sturgis, rather than for the experience of riding to Sturgis. That distinction sounds subtle. Multiplied by hundreds of thousands of people, it produced an entirely different event. The $26 cheeseburger exists because enough people were finally willing to pay for it. Number 10. The founder's death broke the dam. Clarence Pappy Hoel died in 1989. And the timing of what happened next is the single most important sequence in Sturgis history. Because Pappy wasn't just the founder. For 50 years, he had been the bridge. From the very first rally, there had been two Sturgises: the riders, the Jackpine gypsies, the men who lived the thing, and the town's businessmen, who saw the riders as a revenue opportunity. There was friction between those two worlds from day one. The original business association didn't even automatically include the club members who actually raced. The only reason it held together was that one man belonged completely to both worlds. Pappy owned a business and led the club. He was commerce and soul in a single body, and as long as he was alive, he stood in the gap and held the two Sturgises together. In 1989, he died at 85. And in 1990, the very next year, came the explosion we covered in Fact 12. 400,000 people, the largest event in state history, the transformation from gathering to phenomenon. The year after the bridge died, the flood came through. Into the space where Pappy had stood, something rushed that has never left: money. Not because anyone was evil, but because 400,000 people create needs, and needs create businesses, and businesses create more attractions, which create more people. The cycle has run ever since, with no one standing in the gap. Number 9. It took a federal judge to decide who owns the word Sturgis. Here's the moment you know, with certainty, that something changed at the deepest level. The moment people start fighting in federal court over who owns the name. As the rally grew into a multi-hundred-million-dollar machine, the word itself, Sturgis, became one of the most valuable assets in motorcycling. An organization tied to the local Chamber of Commerce trademarked the name and the phrases around it, licensing them to vendors and sponsors. Pay the fee, or you can't put Sturgis on a t-shirt, a patch, a bottle, a poster. That licensing operation generated millions in royalties. Feel the strangeness of that. The name of a small ranching town, named for a Civil War general most attendees have never heard of, had become intellectual property, enforced by lawyers. The event built on a handshake economy, where a man once lent his neighbor money to open a motorcycle shop and then bought a motorcycle from him, had become an event where you could be sued for printing the wrong word on a shirt. The fight went all the way to federal court. And in December 2019, a federal judge ruled against the trademark holders, ordering the marks canceled, ruling in effect that Sturgis could not be owned. The court pried the name loose and handed it back to everyone. Number 8. 4 out of 10 bikes arrive on trailers. Of every fact on this list, this is the one that makes the old-timers angriest. And it's the one that explains them best. By recent counts, something close to 40% of the people who attend Sturgis don't ride there. They trailer their motorcycles, load them behind a truck or an RV, haul them across the country, and unload them for the final miles so they can ride down Main Street and be seen riding down Main Street. To understand why that number lands like a punch, you have to understand what Sturgis originally was. It began as a gypsy tour, a ride. The entire point was the journey, getting to the Black Hills under your own power, on 2 wheels, through weather and breakdowns, and 1,000 miles of America. Pappy Hoel drove a chase vehicle to rescue broken-down riders precisely because the ride was the event. In 1970, when 3,500 riders camped free in the city park, the man next to you had ridden from Tulsa on a machine he maintained himself, and the concept of trailering a bike to a motorcycle rally would have produced the kind of confusion you'd get today bringing a yacht to a swimming meet. Now 4 in 10 arrive with the bike as cargo. The motorcycle has completed its long journey from transportation to prop, something you bring to the photo. The machine works perfectly. The rally runs flawlessly. It just doesn't mean what it used to. And no statistic measures the difference better than the trailer count climbing, year after year, in the parking lots of an event named after a ride. Number 7. The biggest year was also the deadliest. The 75th anniversary. The largest Sturgis Motorcycle Rally that has ever been held, by the most cited estimate, around 739,000 people, with some counts running even higher. Roughly $2.5 million in state tax revenue from a single event. The absolute peak of the machine, the high watermark of 8 decades of growth. It was also the deadliest rally ever held. 15 people died on the roads that year, the highest fatality count in the event's history. The biggest year and the bloodiest year were the same year, and they were the same year for the same reason. Scale. 750,000 people, a huge share of them on motorcycles, compressed into 10 days on the 2-lane roads of the Black Hills, with the bars open and the sun setting. The sheer size that made 2015 a triumph on every spreadsheet made it more dangerous on the pavement than Sturgis had ever been. Since that 2015 peak, by the way, attendance has never returned to that height. The tide has been going out, down by roughly a third in the years that followed. The record may stand for a very long time. Perhaps that's not entirely a bad thing. Number 6. The rally that a pandemic couldn't stop. In the summer of 2020, nearly every large gathering in the United States was canceled. Concerts, festivals, fairs, stadiums, the entire machinery of human assembly switched off by the pandemic. The CDC classified large gatherings of travelers as the highest risk activity there was. Sturgis happened anyway. The 80th anniversary went ahead in August 2020, and roughly 460,000 people came. Nearly 500,000 into a town of 7,000 from every corner of the country. Some headliners pulled off the concert bills. Willie Nelson, ZZ Top, Lynyrd Skynyrd all dropped out. But the stages ran, the bars filled, and Main Street packed shoulder to shoulder while the rest of American public life sat empty. And Sturgis 2020 instantly became something no motorcycle rally had ever been. A national symbol, fought over by both halves of a divided country. To one half, it was a monument to recklessness. Researchers published a study estimating the rally might have seeded hundreds of thousands of cases, a figure other economists and fact-checkers immediately and fiercely disputed. To the other half, it was a monument to freedom, proof that some Americans would not be told they couldn't gather, defended loudly by the governor of the state. We're not relitigating that fight here. The honest answer is that the true numbers were probably unknowable. Number 5. The $800 million machine. Let's just line up the modern numbers, because the scale of what Sturgis became deserves one clean look. In a strong year, the rally draws between 400,000 and 500,000 people, in its record year closer to 750,000, into a town whose permanent population is about 7,000. The economic activity generated roughly $800 million. For the state of South Dakota, the rally is not an event. It's an industry, one of the pillars of the entire summer economy. In 2016, the city formally stretched the rally to a 10-day format, beginning the first Friday of August, running through the second Sunday. 10 days, a span calibrated not to the rhythm of a club of friends, but to the mathematics of visitor days and vendor revenue. Here's the fact inside. The fact None of this was imposed on the rally by outsiders. Every expansion served demand that attendees created by showing up in the numbers they showed up in. The $800 million machine exists because enough people were willing to pay for it to exist. The men who built Sturgis in the early decades weren't willing to pay for it, not because they were cheap, but because for them the point was never the event. The point was the ride. The event was just what happened after you arrived. Which brings us to the men who remember that version. Number 4. The man who lives at Sturgis and won't ride during the rally. Outside Sturgis lives a man who has ridden these hills for 47 years. He was there for the era of free camping in the city park. He has watched every transformation this countdown has described, from a few thousand riders to 500,000 visitors. And during the rally, the 10 days a year when his home becomes the motorcycle capital of the planet, he parks his bike and stays off the roads. His reason, in his own blunt words, he's afraid the dentists and lawyers playing biker for a week will take him out. That sentence deserves to be unpacked, because it's not really about dentists. It's about what happens when an activity that was once an identity becomes an experience that can be purchased. The riders of the early rally were self-selected by the 1,000 miles it took to get there. The ride itself filtered the crowd, and everyone who arrived had proven, by arriving, that they belonged. Today, you can fly in and rent a Harley by the day. The filter is gone. The credential is gone. And a man with 47 years in the saddle judges the Rally Week roads too dangerous, because of the very people the modern rally was redesigned to attract. By attendance metrics, the dentists and lawyers are exactly what Sturgis needs. They fill the campgrounds. They generate the $800 million. They are also the reason a 47-year local rider stays home. Both of those facts are true, and if this list has a thesis, you just heard it. Number 3. The original Sturgis still exists. It just isn't at Sturgis. Here's the fact almost nobody outside the riding world knows. The authentic Sturgis, the small, self-selected, ride there or don't come gathering, did not actually die. It moved. The community that built the original rally didn't evaporate when the crowds arrived. It dispersed into smaller gatherings, run on the exact organizing principle that 1938 Sturgis ran on, riders coming together under their own power because they are riders, with the event as an afterthought to the ride. The Born Free Show in California, the Quail Gathering in Carmel Valley, the Barber Vintage Festival in Alabama, the Ole Valley Antique Meet in Pennsylvania. Events that have deliberately, consciously refused the commercial scale that transformed Sturgis because the people who run them watched exactly what happened in the Black Hills and chose differently. The crowd stayed in Sturgis. The community went elsewhere. Institutions can be bought and sold and trademarked and scaled. What they're made of, it turns out, just walks away and starts over. Number 2. Nobody can agree on the year Sturgis died. Ask 10 longtime riders when Sturgis stopped being Sturgis, and you'll get a genuine argument, not about whether it happened, but about when. Some say 1989, the year Pappy Hoel died, and no one ever again stood in the gap between the riders and the money. Some say 1990, the 50th anniversary, the 400,000, the first year the event felt overrun rather than merely large. Some say 1992, when the manufacturer presence became impossible to ignore. Some say 1995, when finding the grassroots culture required deliberate navigation instead of just showing up. The hardest of the hardcore say 1974, the year of the first vendor tent, and a few sentimentalists go all the way back to 1949, the last year Main Street closed for trophies instead of commerce. And that brings us to number 1, the only honest answer to the whole question. Number 1, Sturgis is the biggest it has ever been, and Sturgis is gone. Both are true. Here is the final fact, and it's the one every other fact on this list has been building toward. By every external measure, Sturgis is more alive than it has ever been. 500,000 people in an ordinary year. $800 million. A name so valuable it took a federal judge to rule that nobody owns it. An event so culturally powerful that a global pandemic could not cancel it. A hometown referendum could not kill it. And its record-setting years generate their own national news cycles. The 9 racers and 175 neighbors of 1938 multiplied into one of the largest recurring human gatherings in the Western Hemisphere. By the numbers, Pappy Hoel's backyard cookout conquered the world. That is true. And by every internal measure, by the only measures that mattered to the people who built it, Sturgis ended somewhere along the way, and it is not coming back. The thing that made it real was that it was small enough to be personal. A community that raced together, broke down together, got rescued by the founder's wife, and ate beans from her kitchen. The racing became a footnote. The ride became optional. 4 in 10 arriving by trailer. The name became a court case. The gathering became a market. The founder died. No one replaced him. And the money moved into the empty space and never left. That is also true. Both things are true. Sturgis is the biggest it has ever been, and Sturgis is gone. It survived by ceasing to be itself. It won, and winning is exactly how it died.